Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I will give people a few seconds to join with the sound as well, because I know there's always a little bit of a delay. And I can see the number of participants is going up. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds so everyone can join us from the beginning. And thanks so much for finding the time to watch this webinar with us, wherever you are, hopefully not too early or not too late. But thanks so much for joining. Okay, I think we make a start and hopefully a few more people will join in the next few seconds. So welcome everyone. Lovely to see so many names I recognize already, and thank you so much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hopefully you're not joining us in the middle of the night. My name is Magda Brown and I'm the recruitment manager for this program for the MSc Major Program Management at Said Business School. And I think I might have spoken with some of you already. I recognize some of the names. So lovely to see you. And I'm joined today by a couple of members of our faculty as well. So we've got with us today Daniel Armanios, who's the BT Professor of Management and the Chair of Major Program Management at Said Business School. And Guy Ainsley, who's the current Program Director and the Program Alumnus himself from Cohort 3. And I will hand over to Guy now, who will tell you a little bit more about the program.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Magda, and welcome everybody, wherever you are. I'm sure people are joining in the middle of the night. We always have a very, very international cohort, so we'll come on to that in a second. This slide here is a very simple one, which shows the structure of the program, and it basically gives you three things that we look at specifically. One is design of programs, how they're constructed, how they're put together. The second is governance, how you run a program correctly. And then the third area is impact. And these work under the overarching theme of leadership, so major program leadership. And this is the new structure. So from cohort 16, which starts September 24, this is a structure that's been put in place to really give us a lot more clarity about what we're trying to do and the structure of the curriculum. Next slide, please. So this is in very broad summary. This is the structure of the program from September 24. So it's a part-time program. Runs over 2 years. That means that most people who undertake this program are working full time, and we work it and structure it in a way that allows you to maintain your work if that's what you want to do. And most people, we only have a very, very few people who don't work full time whilst they're undertaking the program, and we're very aware of that, so we don't try and overload it. It runs over 8 modules. You do approximately 40 hours of work before the module. It says pre-module, and then you do a week in Oxford, and then approximately 40 hours of assignment writing and reading after the week in Oxford. So if you imagine typically a module lasts around 9 weeks, you have 4 weeks beforehand of reading, a week in Oxford, and then about 4 to 6 weeks afterwards of writing your assignment. This is a practitioner program, so we're looking for a minimum of 7 years of relevant professional experience. And this is very relevant to us because when we get in the classroom, we notice and see that people interact tremendously with each other. And that's based upon your work experience, very important. We look for, as an entry requirement, undergraduate degree or relevant professional qualifications. You're not entirely required to have an undergraduate degree, but most of our students do, and many of them have master's degrees, and we have people with PhDs and higher degrees as well. And that just reminds you what the program fees are for the upcoming intake. So a little bit more detail. You have 8 modules of 5 days each in person at Oxford, and it's absolutely essential that people do come to Oxford. We don't allow people to remotely study this program. Attendance in Oxford is absolutely essential. It's part of the learning experience, but it's also part of the social wider framework experience that we create. The modules themselves, as you can see, there's 8 of them, and they are grouped broadly to do with the themes. So we work very hard to make sure that the assessment and the themes are grouped correctly together. If you complete all that, all 7 summative assessments and a dissertation to the standard required, you are awarded an MSc by the University of Oxford. So it's really interesting. Our class profile is fascinating. So we have approximately 60 participants per year for each cohort. And we have a very broad range of where those people come from and the industries and the sectors they represent. And this is really important to the quality of the programme. So we have people who come from all over the world, and they bring lots of experience and insights and views and ways of doing things that all add to the mix as we go along. So as you can see, 32 nationalities, and these are people who are not just from 32 different nationalities. They're living, working, building careers and building major programs in lots of diverse places. So West Africa, Asia, North America, Southern Africa, the Middle East, Europe, everybody is represented pretty much in the room. And it's very important because we get the mix right. We asked for 7 years of experience, but as you can see, the average is about 17 years. The average age of participants is 41, which is high. It's a high average age, and that gives us that really good broad view of what's going on. And we have about 37% female participants. We aim and encourage every year to have more participants, female participants. So, we'd be very happy if it gets to 50% plus. We do specifically support and help female applicants to come through the process. We have built-in diversity of thought and perspective, and this is really important to us. You can see the on the left-hand side, you've got the age bands. So we have this sort of peak and area around 41, as you can see, but we have people who are younger than 30, so people who have come through university and have done very well in their careers. And we also have people who are over 55. The highest age of any participant is somebody in their low 70s who's currently studying with us and bringing a fantastic and interesting perspective from their work. They work for in healthcare in North America and the USA, and brings a fascinating perspective, which is different from younger participants. But nothing is more or less valid than the other. So we're happy to take applicants from a very broad range. And you can see we've got consulting, consumer goods, defence, manufacturing, energy. Everybody's involved in this programme. There's nothing that we don't consider relevant to us. It's the final slide from me, teaching and learning. So it's face-to-face. It's designed to be face-to-face. It's in Oxford. We don't just bring people to Oxford for the sake of it. There's a purpose and a reason for being here. Oxford's a fascinating city to be in. It's architecturally interesting, and it's all very Harry Potter, and it's all very nice and interesting. But there are obviously world-class libraries that you physically access. There's your cohort who you have to sit with and be with in order to generate those relationships. There's the conversations you have outside class as well. There's a really good reason as to why you want to be in Oxford. It's participative. We expect you to do more than just sit in class and listen. So we very strongly encourage people to get properly involved in this. And we have students every year that this happens. People say and do things in class that start off a new line of thought or a new way of thinking about a particular problem. So we want you to participate and also be positively critical. We want you to shape the debate. We want you to bring ideas. So it's very important that people come to this, physically face to face. They participate and they're critical. That's it from me. Obviously, we'll do some Q&A later, but I'm going to hand back over to Magda now.
Thank you. Yes, I can see a couple of questions there already in the chat, so we get to them in a second. I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about networking and your networks at Oxford. So your closest network is obviously the cohort that Guy told you about, but you will also become a member of a college when you're at Oxford. So Saïd Business School is obviously an integrated part of the University of Oxford. We are the largest department at Oxford, but when you join SAID, you also join the University of Oxford. And MMPM students are all members of an Oxford college. So when you get your offer, you also have to choose which college you want to join from the list of colleges available. And this is basically your additional network. This enables you to make wider connections with different communities around Oxford, with the faculty as well. And colleges, not only they have accommodation very often, but also they have different facilities. They send invitations to different events. So it's a very useful network to be a part of. And of course, your alumni network as well. So with this program, you get full lifelong membership of the Oxford Business Alumni Network. And it is a very active global network. As you can see the numbers there on the slide, over 24,000 members now in many different countries with many different chapters. They do organize a lot of different events, online and in person as well, black tie dinners. It's a great network to be a part of. And of course, the University of Oxford Alumni Network as well. That's over, I think now, 350,000 members worldwide. Okay, so I guess we move on to questions. I can see a couple of people who raised their hands. So would anyone want to unmute themselves and just ask the question verbally? Dale, I can see Dale, his hand up. Hi, Dale.
Sorry, I was having microphone issues there. Yeah,
Okay.
so sorry, I missed the very first bit of it. What's the weighting between the different courses and the dissertation?
Right. Okay. So the weighting, the dissertation accounts for 20% of the overall mark. There is no, with the exception of the research methods, there is no individual module weighting. They are combined into various assessments that have different weightings. So you'll do written assessment, there'll be a group presentation, there is a group project as well. They've all got slightly different weightings to them. The dissertation is 20%.
Perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've got two other people with hands up. So Salman Ali, would you like to ask a question? If you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity, first of all. And second of all, my question is, I'm an international applicant. So what are my requirements and what are my pre-requirements to apply for the course? I'm sorry, the program.
Okay, yeah. I can answer this question. Salman, could you mute yourself now? Because there's a lot of background noise and we can hear. Thank you so much. It's easier now. The requirements are the same for all our applicants, regardless where you're from. We actually have a lot of, as Guy said, a lot of international applicants. You need to have 7 years of work experience, relevant work experience, a good undergraduate degree, unless you've got lots of relevant work experience. So there aren't any, because this is a part-time program, there aren't any requirements in terms of visa or anything like that. When you get an offer for this program, most of our students, they apply for a short stay visitor visa that is valid for 6 months. So they apply every 6 months, but no other requirements. If English is not your first language, you can ask for a waiver based on professional grounds or academic grounds. For example, if you use English regularly at work. If none of these apply to you, then you would have to take a recognized language test. So is that it? Does that answer your question, Simon?
Yes, thank you very much.
And I've got some questions in the chat as well. So let me just have a quick look. There's a question from Harold. Can you please provide a cost breakdown of the fees? For example, accommodation, flights, etc. So Harold, the fees only cover the cost of the program. So you would have to pay for your flights and your accommodation in Oxford. We, when you're here for your module weeks, we do provide some food. So we usually provide breakfast and lunches every single day, and you've got one college dinner on a Thursday, but everything else you would have to cover. In terms of the flights, obviously it depends where you're flying from. In terms of accommodation, different options are available. Depending on your sort of price range, there's plenty of hotels. Like I said, some colleges provide accommodation as well, and it's very reasonably priced, but it's something you would have to book yourself. Another question about accommodation, how much would accommodation cost? It's anything between £50 per night to go as high as you want to, because you can stay in obviously in a 5-star hotel as well, but I think you should budget at least £50 for college accommodation, which is quite basic, just so you know. And the usual hotel room is between 120 and £250 per night. Okay. Let me just see if there are any other questions. Any scholarships? Yes, we do have some scholarships available. They are quite competitive. We have Directors Award and Women's Award. The Directors Award is up to 50% of the fees, and the Women's Award is 50% of the fees. We have a couple of Women's Awards, and the Directors Award is awarded on merit. So your academic qualifications, your work experience, your impact, the impact you can make with the program, the impact you have already made in your organization or in your region or in your country. And in terms of applying for those scholarships, we ask you to upload one additional scholarship essay into your application. Let me just see if there's anything more. Guy, this question might be for you. Dale is asking, are any modules done in collaboration with industry? For example, working on direct business problems as part of the teamwork?
No, we don't tend to do that kind of collaboration, because people are only here for 5 days during, typically sort of once every 2.5-3 months. So people bring plenty of challenges and problems with them to discuss, but they tend to be from their existing companies and existing projects and programs. So we don't do that. How many times are expected to be in Oxford over 2 years? 8 times minimum. People often come for graduations and various other events as well, but you're required to come to Oxford 8 times, which is the 8 modules.
Thanks, Guy. Someone's asking, is there a full-time program? No, we only deliver it part-time.
Career outcomes of program graduates. They're very broad. People tend to do a number of things. Some people go off and start new businesses on the back of what they what they do. Some people get promotion, of course. Some people go off and change industries. It's really interesting how these programs tend to act as a catalyst for change as well. So people come to the programs expecting and hoping to change their jobs. We also find that typically our participants don't stay that stable anyway, because people end up in their careers because they're medium to high level already. They tend to be quite active. So we often find that people start in one job, one company, and change during the 2 years. So we say, how much does it cost to stay in the colleges for the 8 modules? As Magda says, college accommodation tends to be fairly cheap, but also can be quite basic. So 60, 70, 80 pounds per night whilst you're in most of the colleges. It can be as low as 40. There is no visa, working visa with this, and you're not able to get a working visa because of this program. What are the key skills and benefits one would expect to take away for themselves and their organizations? Basically, be far better at major program management. It's a broad range of skills. This is not a technical degree. I should point that out to everybody. This is a practitioner degree for people who already bring to it significant experience. So this is not like, you're not doing an undergraduate degree in project management. That is not what we're trying to do here. This is far broader.
Thanks so much, Guy. I think that's most of the questions. I can just see Hassan with his hand up. So Hassan, would you like to just quickly ask your question?
Yeah, my question was answered, so thank you. It was about the accommodation.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. We will move on now because we've got quite a busy schedule for this session, and I will hand over now to Daniel, who will tell you a little bit more about the future of major program management.
Thanks, Magda, and thanks, Guy. And once again, I'm Daniel Armanios. I'm the academic director and BT professor and chair of major program management. So as part of this session, what we like to do is give you a sense of a little bit of a taste or a glimpse of what it's like in the classroom with us. And so we're doing just a little bit of kind of setting the stage of major program management, some interesting trends and insights and how they potentially help us think with a more critical analytical lens about major program management. And to be clear from what Guy said, this is a practitioner's based degree that looks at major programs from a more social science perspective, which is unusual compared to most programs out there that will take on a kind of engineering, sometimes even specifically construction management, construction engineering lens to major programs. And we're much broader in our thinking about this here. Magda, next slide, please. So just to set the stage, there's, one of the questions actually was, what do we think about in terms of major programs from the perspective of this program? The academic view, if you toggle one more, Magda, is just large-scale projects, even sometimes portfolios of projects that entail multiple complex stakeholders and organizations. This means that a lot of different stakeholders from communities all the way to private businesses to government are interacting on a collective goal to deliver a certain kind of infrastructure system, even a welfare program, energy, deploying a renewable energy platform, etc. Also, what goes into the program, which is the inputs, how long it takes, which is the timescales, and what comes out of it can all be ambiguous. And it may differ by different stakeholders. Perhaps if you're running an online education platform, for the delivery agency that's doing the online education platform, their output is actually delivering the platform. But maybe for the sponsoring organization, that's a Ministry of Education and the like, their output is actually the learning and the attainment you will get from the platform. So again, you can kind of see it can change or vary. In terms of a practitioner view, there are some metrics some people like to use. Projects that are over, or programs that are over 1 billion pounds or more, that affect 1 million plus people, take 5+ years to build. And what's really important, why the 5+ years is really important, is that often given major programs take long timelines, 5, sometimes 10, sometimes 20 years. Just look at what's happened recently with the evolution or events, or some people could argue conclusion of HS2, is that the people that start the project may not be there till the end of it. And for those who don't know, HS2, high-speed rail 2 in the UK. And so you have to build in handoffs to come in. And so from that perspective, now this is the audience member input time. From that perspective, what kinds of major programs come to mind for you? Anyone want to put in, just throw in whatever you want to do in the chat. It doesn't need to be, no need for speaking, but just in the chat. But in the classroom, you will definitely be probed quite a bit to bring up. But if, based on that definition, 1 billion plus, 5+ years to build. So Crossrail, so large scale transportation projects, really nice session. Yep, Metrolink, you could think of Metrolink transportation as well. Daniel, thanks you for that. Smart cities and national grid, smart planning systems, excellent, Dale. Anyone else want to bring up digital transformation programs? You're starting to see how wide it gets. Historically, as you saw, the very first question, the first answer is right away around transportation infrastructure. But right now, as you see, a lot of you are now bringing up a lot of different distributed, diverse kind of programs. And we'll get into where I think that's very much the trend into the future. Historically, scholarly, it's been much more large-scale infrastructure and transportation. So if Magda, if you toggle a bit, we're thinking London Stadium from the 2012 Olympics, bridges, roads. That's the historical view. And as you're seeing, and as we're seeing from the participants, we're getting a wide range of much more distributed, projects that may not even have just one convening site, but many sites of control and operation. And so to kind of give a flavor of this, some of you have talked about this with renewable and others. We're going to look at a few slides, and the questions I want you to think about here is, do you recognize these as major programs, especially in its broader view? And then what are the new challenges and opportunities? So for that, we're going to take a little journey into portable renewal. Before we go into portable renewal, we're going to start looking at, let's just take the original kind of basis of major programs, which historically has been an infrastructure. You're seeing differences. Before we toggle here, before I tell you what this is, anyone want to take a guess what kind of infrastructure program this is? So you do your business, you empty the car, it's transported, it's cleaned, and then it's brought back to you. Anybody want to take a guess what kind of system this is? You could put it into chat. Anybody want to try to get a guess? Recycling, yes, but a recycling of a very specific human form of close, a different form of nuclear waste, not nuclear, but this is container-based. Yeah, it's a waste management system. It's a container-based sanitation system. But what's interesting, it's interesting what Dale brought up in terms of nuclear waste, is that you could see on a much larger scale with a different set of processes that you still see this kind of modularity. But I bring this one up because even now, in parts of the world where water is more inaccessible, we have to really store and preserve water, you start seeing a proliferation of these kind of container-based sanitation methods. We see this quite frequently in low water running areas as well. If we go down to the next one, before we reveal, now you're fabricating a piece off-site. You bring the piece in and you literally plug it in almost like Legos. Anyone want to get a sense of what this is like? What kind of construction this is like? We do see this in smart cities, but anyone have a sense of what do you, and this is for those who are maybe with us from, you can 3D print this, but not this type. Anyone have a guess? Keep going, this is good. Yes, modular construction, very good, Fahad. So this is modular infrastructure construction. Some people, this is being quite active in deployment. In fact, some cities, for example, in Hong Kong and China, have made this central to their development plans because there's such little space on the island communities that they want to bring everything pre-made, because trying to bring in a crane to deploy large-scale projects in site, is the spatial constraints now are such where it's much more difficult. And then one final one in terms of, this is essentially, you're taking images of a building, you're processing them digitally, and you're uploading it right to the cloud anywhere in the world. Anyone want to have a sense of what this is like? It's a form of building information building information modules, or BIM, building information models, sorry. Yes, involves GIS. It's a form of BIM called scan to BIM. Basically, anywhere in the world, you can scan a building and start digitizing it to show it anywhere around the world. So it's really distributing even the mapping and visualization of building information models. So maybe a deeper dive into one, we're going to go into portable renewables. This is a company out of Canada. It's called Shine. They've developed a wind turbine that can fit in your backpack, and you can take it anywhere in the world. It charges, it automatically goes to the direction of the wind, and it charges up to 4 devices. It has a power output about 40 watts. To give a kind of video of how this works, of literally carrying bits or components of major programs literally in your backpack. Here is a little video just to give you a sense of what this works. There's no need for sound here, just giving you a sense of how this works. So instead of thinking, we think of wind turbines, we think of large wind turbines, but now you can literally bring it with you on a camping trip. So you can set it up with a tripod. It'll automatically go to the direction of the wind, and then you charge different components, whether it's your iPad, iPhone, etc., right from your book bag. And so you could take this anywhere for those who even need emergency construction. You could even think of it for defense. If you need to do a forward operation, need quick power to do something quickly, you can start seeing that. The next one, we can click off of this. We don't need to see the whole video. The next one is a Swiss company called Power Blocks. This is literally a solar panel in a box. It can do up to 200 watts of power, and you can stack them up and put them together like Legos. You can collect them in a series. And now you're starting to get really kind of larger scale power needs, maybe for a house or a home that's quite portable. And then for those who need to power up an entire town, you could talk to the American company Uprise Energy, which has literally a wind turbine that can come to you by trailer, especially for disaster relief, emergency needs, can go up to 50 kilowatts of power. And then to get into the truly, truly interesting and cutting edge and bizarre, there's even now major programs in the metaverse. So this is a company called ArchiDAO. It's not actually a company, it's more of a collective of architects that have actually modularized the major program delivery process to use distributed autonomous organizations, DAOs, or what some might commonly call blockchain or smart contracts. Essentially, they've allowed you to hire a collective of designers by paying them through blockchain. And so they do a lot of kind of interesting design components, delivery components, system mapping components for programs that you can pay for blockchain. Going further, some researchers out of at the time ETH Zurich, but then they're going to they're now at TU Delft. They actually have now self-governing infrastructure, literally can operate purely autonomously with blockchain. So for example, it can detect with sensors that the floor is dirty. It can hire a cleaning staff to come in, pay them with blockchain, and immediately clean the surface. They have the electronics all with Internet of Things technology. So if you're missing milk, the sensor will tell you, it'll immediately phone or connect to the grocery store, play with blockchain and bring it in. And it's been pretty self-governing autonomously, literally with all the transactions being governed by the infrastructure itself. It's quite astounding, very different world of thinking of major programs as distributed, kind of really almost devolving the control, not just to humans at a very local level, but even to the infrastructure itself. As another example, following on this slide, they've actually now developed a kind of physical experimental hub called Privoc in the Czech Republic. They then created a timeline that you can act on this system by activating. If so many people offer so many Ethereum coins, they will create a parcel, they will create a digital space. And now they've taken this and digitized it and put it on Decentraland, which is if we click one more, Decentraland, which is on the metaverse. They have a kind of a digital copy of this crypto twin Privoc on digital space. They create, with blockchain, they activate different kinds of communities to discuss it, have conferences, even experiment on the physical space, and any kind of interesting physical technique, any digital technique that comes up, they actually will print it and apply it to the physical space to actually connect that between the digital twin of Privoc on Decentraland to the physical space to see how it operates. So literally the metaverse is becoming a really interesting experimental area for all sorts of different forms of construction, processing, scheduling, delivery on the digital space that you can then print out and create and make it physical. And so what is all of this telling us? We have kind of interestingly two kinds of tensions. One is these programs are hyper wide and varied and globalized. So if you take, let's take a typical cloud migration system or a cloud server management system, which could be one kind of major program. You both have to manage data across wide social and digital distances. And you have to decide, what do I make available analytically on the cloud? But if I have a really specialized high-end thing that needs to get quick analysis, I need to also have nodes that can localize some of that data analysis. On the other hand, we have something super, super hyper localized. So when you think of the portable renewable energy kinds of projects out there, as last mile communities such as this one in Zambia who has solar, as their energy ambitions increase, how do you connect all of these highly localized, highly isolated last mile communities and map them out into ways that can coordinate? You're starting to see a very different kind of major program, which is how to connect very sparse local communities to kind of collect or aggregate their energy ambitions and needs. Versus on the more kind of server management system, it's very much more, how do I put things on a cloud that can really analyze over long periods of time, much wider spaces, even though you may need to allocate some things locally. So what are we seeing about major programs? And I think what we're excited about and what we really offer and think about in this MSc is we still covered, by the way, when we talk about this slide, the stuff on the left-hand side still is critically important. And a lot of the fundamental theories and knowledge will come from this side. And we're trying to show how it is applying also to newer trends. So historically, quite a few infrastructure, mega project kind of major programs have been centralized in terms of their command and control and their coordination, where it's multi-organizational, but you eventually converge on a single site. You're starting to see much more distributed projects, even with infrastructure, a wider set of coordination across a wider varieties of sectors, a wider variety of communities, wider variety of local kind of physical sites. The other thing too is that there's a push In some cases, when you think of scaling a demand, that in some case, one philosophy could be to take one project, make it bigger for millions of people versus taking a bunch of other smaller projects, putting them together and right-sizing them for different communities. I can get to 1 million served with one project serving 1 million, or hundreds of projects, each serving 1,000 people, 100 people, 10 people across. That's the idea of right-sizing. Another philosophical point is oftentimes in order to reduce costs, we're trying to standardize, we're trying to replicate the outputs so that we can do things in a much more replicable way. Sometimes though, especially when you're dealing with very new kinds of major programs, think fusion energy as a major program, think 3D printing a community as a new kind of major program, you may have to get the method down right first before you then think about how you're going to deploy it. And the method may be the same, but what results from it may be different based on the local climate, local community needs, etc. And then finally, when we think of standardization, we're thinking about how to build kind of reliable assurance mechanisms within a major program. At the same time, we may have to think about how to tailor that for local communities. And you'll deal with all of these facets in our MSc, from how do you deal with a centralized single site versus distributed across many? How do you try to expand one kind of project versus expansion through right sizing a several kind of projects? How do you can you come up with replicable ways to develop kind of outputs, be it roads, bridges, etc.? Or for newer to the world projects, how do you think of the end goal, as well as thinking about how to situate it to local contexts? So in order to deal with that, there's some ideas that we've been kind of thinking in mind as to how do you operate in this kind of world. So if it's more distributed, what are some things you can do? And a couple of things we've been thinking about is how do you coordinate when you have a bunch of people, a bunch of material needs, a bunch of insights and know-how spread across a wide variety of sectors and ideas. What are the kinds of scaffolding you can build? So by scaffolding, we mean the kinds of structures, digital tools, and devices that can help you know who knows what. That was much easier historically when everyone's working on a single site. When I see Guy on the floor with me, I can kind of get a sense of what's going on, or Magda, etc. Versus now, if we're now in a distributed site, Guy may be in Leeds, he may be in Manchester, he may be in Mogadishu, and I don't necessarily know what he's doing. And so having devices of who knows what could be useful. And then finally, also, because there's a real push to ensure that those benefits from our major programs are more equitably distributed, we need to see who's missing historically, that we need to be involved in these programs. So these final two slides we'll get into. So the next one around scaffolding. On one hand, we need to reimagine the possible. For example, when you're dealing with 5 to 10 years, take climate change as an example. The projects that come online now, if we take the prognostications of net zero seriously, we need to reduce emissions by half by 2035. 2050 have to be net zero. So if we take projects now, if you think about when they're online, at the get-go, they have to have emissions. Well, what's additional rain going to look like on my building? What's heat going to do to my server system? We're not really clear. And so what's going on, we have a huge set of digital technology that are helping you try to reimagine what that possibility could be, whether it's augmented reality, whether it's digital twins, to help people kind of coordinate, navigate what those futures could look like. On the other hand, you then have to situate it within existing organizations and social understandings. It's great that I've discovered this cool new thing by digitizing this building, but how do I coordinate with a community who is their worldview is based on a certain set of norms and understandings? This is where things as simple as Slack are useful in terms of coordination, even model projects. So there's an interesting scaffolding out of Nicaragua where they looked at how to try to help informal dairy farmers export their products. So they're essentially, Nicaragua put a huge ambition to create a wide series of major programs to export their kind of unique dairy and other kinds of agricultural goods. And to do that, they literally built a model farm. So they let people walk through, informal farmers walk through and say, here's how I need to keep the cows managed. Here's how I make sure they get the right feed. Here's how I make sure I inseminate the mares appropriately. Here's how I milk the cows, etc. So people can actually visualize that and understand it. On the sensing side, we're now dealing with trying to be much more targeted about where we find these gaps in communities. And this is where we use ideas from sociology of infrastructure. Turns out certain kinds of infrastructure leads to certain kinds of gaps. So in this picture, this is a well-known study that came out of the United States, is that oftentimes a lot of social cohesion and coordination are done on what is known as trivial streets, meaning things where we can walk. So all the smaller dash, the less thick lines here, which is between communities 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, those pedestrian walkways become really important in terms of coordination. The challenge then becomes when you have non-trivial streets like highways, etc., which is the darker lines, that can actually naturally, unfortunately, segregate communities and others, such that sometimes social cohesion could be disrupted simply because I don't have infrastructure that allows me to walk and talk with you. We can actually blow this up. And so if you look at the middle one, we can actually blow this up and look at different typologies across the city to see where there could be gaps in access. Perhaps if there's a lot of highway roads in a community, there may be a harder time to get access to those communities, coordinate responses than if there's one with a lot of pedestrian streets. So you can actually start using those kind of replicable typologies of infrastructure to detect need. Now, why does this matter to me if we bring it to the digital space? If you look at smart city planning systems, like take this traffic planning system, is that this one, if I look at it from a kind of a planning perspective, I see a bunch of cars. So I assume, okay, this is a highway that wants to optimize cars. And so you keep doing cars. However, what we know from the previous 2 images, 1 and 2, is that the challenge we have is that that these infrastructure systems are not evenly distributed. So for example, certain communities will have certain kinds of bridges or certain kinds of road systems. And in this picture on the very right, the digitization of the traffic planning system, you see a truck a bus way in the background. Now, from the perspective of AI trying to optimize this traffic, they may just assume the data is what they observe. And so they'll think, okay, this is just something where buses don't want to be on. However, if we have restrictive bridges well miles in the distance that are blocking buses from entering this road, then I might be optimizing a bias in the physical infrastructure system, not the digital, meaning that the trucks may want to, the buses may want to come into this space but can't because the infrastructure is restricting it, not because that is a optimized or optimal way in which they would want to be on that traffic system. So one of the things you can start using when you start getting this kind of typologies that could detect restriction, you can start penalizing your algorithms for physical instantiations of bias, not just the digital ones. So a lot of the focus right now has been training data that's more representative, more inclusive of diverse kind of populations. But we could also think of physical spaces that could also be the case. And so with that, what we hopefully in this little taster session, you're getting a sense that major programs are really broad. They are both convened on central sites, but broad, widely distributed across. And our program is trying to equip you with different tools to reimagine, re-envision those kinds of wider range of programs and to be able to understand how to realize the benefits and drive impact from them. And so from that, I gave you a couple of examples of scaffolding and sensing tools we use in some of our work and some of our teaching. And with that, sorry, I tend to talk fast. So if you have any clarification questions, please don't hesitate. As I tell you, hopefully when we'll see you in the classroom, this is a very back and forth kind of dialogue, and always kind of stop me when I get too excited, enthusiastic, and talk at speed. Thank you. Magda, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I think all the students love when you get enthusiastic and excited about what you're talking about in the classroom. So thank you so much for sharing a bit of a flavor of how we teach here at Oxford. I just wanted to quickly share the next couple of application deadlines with everyone. Next one is next Monday, and then the following one is in January, and my email address as well. If anyone would like to reach out, I'm always very happy to have a call, to have a chat about the program and the application process. And I think we might have a couple of questions, so I will stop sharing my screen because it's very difficult to see the questions when I'm sharing, and just double check if we missed anything in the chat. I think that's everything. Oh, just answers to Daniel's questions. Okay, so if I think Hassan and Nassim, I think those are the old hands from before, I believe. So if there are no more questions, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Guy and Daniel for joining us today. I know how busy you guys are, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everyone who joined us today as well, especially if you're joining in the middle of the night. Much appreciated. And please do reach out, come and speak to me if you've got any questions. And I hope we see you here in Oxford, hopefully next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank you
see
so
next
much.
year in Oxford.
Yes, hopefully see you shortly next year.